This conference will now be recorded.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so that's all right. So that's how we will do it. We will just set the context as far as the city is concerned, BBMP, what can be done positively, and have at the last, say, 20-30 minutes, have a little bit of a Q&A. Please feel free, once again, as I'm saying, to just share your questions on chat, so we are able to direct the conversation rather than having, just me speaking to myself. I very rarely do a PPT, and Soumya will tell you how I struggle with this. I never do a PPT, but today I just thought I would sort of try and get a structure so that we're sort of in place. So bear with me on this.
Though we have set about 1 hour for today's meeting, I can assure you will definitely exceed, because many people will have questions to ask.
Well, yeah, happy to answer. And the good news is I have my lawyer standing by. So, this is one of the times when I'm so sorted, I can't tell you. So now, how does one bring in okay. So this is, you're able to see the screen. This is the first time I'm using a PPT on a Zoom or a GoToMeeting. Can you see this?
Yeah, I'm able to see. It's quite clear.
Okay. So what I wanted to just do, and I'm going to run through the PPT quickly so we get a sense of what we want to talk about. The idea is not animal welfare, but look at something which is compassionate. I don't know if all of you have been following the kind of positivity around animals in the last month of COVID. It has been quite extraordinary. There have been terrible things that have happened, but there have also been great things that have happened. And that is something for me which is extraordinary. Whether you look at the kind of initiatives that have happened in making sure that feeding of animals is happening on a reasonably large scale. If you look at the fact that people who were struggling in terms of, wondering how to take their animals for a veterinary service or fodder for their cattle, there are, people like us have sort of pushed very hard to get veterinary services listed as essential, and therefore things have started happening in terms of medical care and feed for animals. So there has been a lot of good things which are happening, and I think it's important for us to stay with the positives and move towards a vision of the positive. Right, rather than having a vision of checklist of things that we really shouldn't be doing. I'd like very much for us to look at a place where animals and humans can coexist, and we can figure out a common ground, of coexistence, of perhaps moving beyond coexistence to actual compassion, or to, dare I say the word, to love. Again, to put it in context, you're talking to someone who till about 20 years ago, if you had used the word DOG, I would have been running in different directions. I was petrified of animals, very, very scared. So if you had a dog in your house, I would say, if you don't mind, can you tie it up? Because I'm really, really scared of dogs. And look from where to where. So there is nothing better than a reformed criminal. And I'm a sort of standing example of that. And I think I say that only because all of us have come from different places. I'm completely comfortable with the fact that some of you adore dogs or adore animals. Some of you are vegetarians, some are not, some are vegan, some are not. Some absolutely detest dogs and just hate the thought of these street dogs driving your sleep away at night. I respect all your views. I understand that each of us have a different perspective. What I'm trying to do right now is set it in context of two things: the law and what our rights are as citizens, to make sure that we not only follow the law, but make the city a more livable and a more holistic place from that point of view. So I'll go on from there, right? I truly believe that, because we've all gone through so much of aching love for an animal, and I particularly am very, very fond of dogs, and I have seen the kind of love and the kind of, I don't know, the kind of belief makes me feel like I'm a better person. I truly believe some part of my soul has wakened, with the love of an animal. Now, let's talk about ground realities, right? This is an amazing situation to be in. We, whether we love animals or we hate animals, and I'm sorry I'm using these extreme words, are stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? And I'll tell you why I'm saying that. We have a situation where we have a large number of dogs. We do have a fair amount of confrontations. we have bites. We have people chasing cars or people, dogs chasing cars or people. Lots of possibilities of confrontation, and it's very, very painful. It's messy, and people take stances, and rightly so. I can't blame anybody for doing that. And on the other hand, right? So suppose if I have a little 2-year-old and I'm going out to the park and some big dog comes and barks at her, I get scared. On the other hand, as a welfareist, I know that the law is very strict. You can't kill a dog, you can't relocate a dog. So here am I walking on the streets, unable to do anything, right? The law says one thing, and at the same time, as a person, I'm stuck with something else. And there's naturally more and more scope for irritation, resentment, etc. What is the only solution right now? And that's why it's so important to have this conversation, is to understand the law, to understand the reality of what needs to be done, and most importantly, be able to work with the government to make sure that the focus and the ends that we want to work towards are met. And the only way we can do this is by making sure that we have a very effective animal birth control system in place. That's the critical and only way we can go forward. And let's talk about that a little later. Our city, see, all of us in the space of animal welfare hit 2 or 3 headlines that we see in the papers ever so often. City gone to the dogs. That's when we yawn and we say, oh my God, some stupid sub-editor was doing this. Or stray dog menace. And we roll our eyes once again because it's such a pain to keep hearing. But the reality is, for somebody who doesn't like or is scared of dogs, this is a huge issue. We have approximately 3.14 lakh street dogs, right? Most of them are quite peaceful, they coexist, they're community dogs. Some of them can be a little vicious, and therefore we are concerned only about the ones which are outliers. I do want to cover what is it that you, as a citizen and as an active citizen, and going forward as a BNP member who is going to make a difference in your ward, in your city, what is it that you need to know? I also want to quickly cover, and at that point, Alvin, I hope you don't mind, I can bring in our wonderful lawyer on the very strong laws that exist around animals, around stray dogs, around animal birth control, etc. The next point is animal cruelty. We all see it, we hear it, we don't know what to do about it. There have been some interesting shifts right now in the law and its implementation, which will affect us as citizens and as BNP to do more and to be more active and to be able to take the implementation framework forward. And we really do have the power to do that if we all work together, right? So stay with that, the helplessness that we feel when we see cruelty. What can we do to help? So that's the other point I want to talk about. Related to that, you're going to hear the word State Animal Welfare Board, or SAWB, a lot. And I will tell you a little bit about why that is going to be so important for you going forward, to know about it and to understand how to deal with it, because that is the arm that will deal with cruelty across the country to a certain extent, but specifically on the state and in the city of Bangalore. There are some very interesting new rules which have come in under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, which is the dog breeding and marketing rules and pet shop rules. Most of us have had this terrible experience of seeing, breeder dogs being abandoned, in terribly abused states, or puppies being sold online, and terribly, some really heartbreaking things which I don't even want to get into. I think we've all seen it. I could have easily, pulled up pictures to show you some of the terrible things that happen on the ground, but I'll spare you that. But we all know the horrors of breeding and of just results in so many more dogs on the street and abuse, etc. You'd be interested to know, while we're on that subject, that we also work very hard, and there are many people on this group. I mean, we have Alvin, we have Harini Raghavan, who's leads Citizens for Animal Birth Control, Nandita Subbarao, who's a colleague in both CABC and CJ Memorial Trust, who have done an extraordinary amount of work to make sure that the State Animal Welfare Board, and most importantly, even the BBMP, the BBMP actually moved to be able to make this happen, has issued a circular that you cannot abandon your dog during the COVID time. Guilty of doing so, you have to not only pay the fine and suffer imprisonment, but if anybody instigates you to do it, they are guilty under an IPC code. So this is unusual, and this is how it's so important that when citizens start moving and start engaging with the government, you're going to find things that have never happened before starting to happen, simply because the laws that have been in place or have started to get into place are now getting into the next stage, which is implementation mode. And that is critical for all of us here who are interested in not just laws, but an implementation to work on. I want to cover how can you make a difference. I also want to talk about enabling and leveraging BBMP. I have to say this, we constantly are at such a battle with BBMP, and particularly in animal welfare, where we work on two grounds. We work on animal birth control and street dogs, and animal rabies vaccination, anti-rabies vaccination. So these are two things we engage on very, very extensively with the BBMP. And we have to say that we've had our ups and downs, and on ABC, we have had more downs than ups. We will talk about this in a little bit. Animal birth control is the only reason for being able to survive the next few years, bring a city which is both compassionate to animals and compassionate to human beings. Let's not forget that's a critical part of what we're at. But they have been very good at the time of the COVID. When it comes to stress, when it comes to a very, very difficult and almost a cruel time for animals, when they were starving on the street, they had no food at the eateries that were normally open where they would get their food from. They've actually created a budget for feeding of street dogs. They've actually helped feeders who were used to feeding dogs in that area, giving them passes, helping them in terms of coordination, sometimes even helping on food to make sure that all these animals get fed, getting fodder for cattle that have been neglected by their goshalas, etc. So while we crib a lot, and I'm sorry to say, but I'm the first one who raises my hand and makes a big noise, please let us also acknowledge the fact that BBMP has been extraordinary in this time of the pandemic, where they have reached forward, worked harder, and actually partnered with many of us in terms of making that impact on animal welfare. The last point on this particular this slide is the building up of a ward level manifesto. Thanks to Shrikant, we have from the Citizens for Animal Birth Control, and I said I hope Harni is here. We've worked very hard in the last 2.5 years to get animal birth control back on the table in a structured format with proper representation done in the way it should. So what we've done is we've insisted, not we alone, I mean obviously we've done it as a city, but from the Citizens for Animal Birth Control group, we've pushed very hard on making sure that the 8 zones that are up are represented by enough agencies who work on animal birth control on the ground, on also rabies vaccinations, work to make sure that these systems are running. But also in the meanwhile, created a community around it, which means each zone has its WhatsApp group. There's a WhatsApp group at monitoring level, at the for relocation, for a couple of other things when there's escalations. So we've got a Facebook group, we've got a WhatsApp group, and all these make sure that there is a great amount of leveraging in terms of getting the job done, right? So the manifesto has worked on multiple things, and this I would say thanks to Shrikant really, making sure that we had something that could be a bit of a cookie cutter that we could use on all wards and make it possible for everyone to know what needed to be done at their own level, right? What you need to know is that India is probably one of the most compassionate countries in the world as far as animals are concerned. Now, we may have also the largest export of meat and whatever else, but the fact is that we have a no culling policy. There's no possibility of you culling, pet dogs or in this kind of thing in India. So unless the dog is terminally ill or there's a problem, you don't have a culling policy really. And that is probably from 2001, 2004 14, I think Albin will correct me on that, when the animal birth control rules became very much more strict and implementable across all states. So this is good to know, but it has, as it says, as I can understand from people who don't like street dogs or community dogs, it has its downsides because there are some confrontation you can do nothing about. Our constitution is fantastic. It protects the stray dog's not only right to life, so you cannot kill or cull dogs, but also territory. That means you cannot, suppose if, and Sami and I were having this chat a little while ago, saying, hey, the dog is making a lot of noise and neighbors were complaining, etc. You cannot relocate a dog from where they are and send them elsewhere because they have no right to food. They don't know how to forage, so they very often die because they don't know how to be able to be safe and get their food. So that's as far as the Supreme Court and Constitution is concerned. We're very, very strong. There is a large law, which is the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. It's a huge one. It's made in the 60s. And a lot of different rules come under that. There are a lot of issues around, cattle, transportation. There are many. It's a huge, huge law. Yes, it has very poor, you have a 50 rupee fine technically, and everybody makes a big deal out of it. But some of the sub rules have got a lot of very hefty fines. For example, if you look at just this issue of, for example, abandoning your dog, it's 3,000 rupees and up to 3 months in prison. So you do have some very strong sub rules that protect you. The Supreme Court has been a huge, huge force in this. So they mandate no culling or relocation of dogs, as we already discussed. But the direction is that they direct nationally and state-wise and district-wise the civic authority to be the partner for ensuring that animal birth control and rabies, anti-rabies vaccinations are done. The assumption is, and this seems logical, many studies in the past have shown that when animals were culled, the force just came back. It had no real impact on the biggest issue, which was bites and rabies. WHO guidelines even at that time were very, very clear that the most humane and the most sensible, sustainable way of managing stray dog population was neuter and vaccinate. So the neuter makes sure that there are no pups, so there's no more expansion of population, that there's no puppies, so mothers are not getting territorial or fighting. Males are not getting territorial and going across neighborhoods and picking up fights, and therefore bites in the neighborhood increase. You're having a lot more calmer dogs in the area who are settled in, who are more guard dogs than anything else. So over a period of time, of course, in the population, dogs have the natural life cycle, the dog population comes down. So you have a neutering as being your primary goal. Secondly, if you vaccinate all of them for rabies, which is what we should do, even if there's a chance that a dog, slightly nicks you or whatever, you have no worries that you're going to get rabies because the dog has been vaccinated. So these two things were considered to be the norm and the base for which this policy of animal birth control was set up for all of India. And one of the ways that all of us, know that a dog has been vaccinated and neutered is they have a notch in their ears. If you look closely, their ear will have a V-shaped cut. So that's your immediate guess that the dog has been neutered and vaccinated. You will see most people will have a look at street dogs one more time just to make sure that they're neutered and if they're not or vaccinated. And you kind of wonder, like, how did you know? This is how it is. So this is the stamp that is given to all dogs who have been neutered or vaccinated. The Animal Welfare Board of India is the authority which has these strict rules, and there are many other things that protect feeders, that protect dogs as far as which areas they use, or there are lots of advantages and a lot of protection for people. You would probably know that, for example, the apartment association started getting very tough on whether you could keep dogs or not, and it was unconstitutional, simple as that. So we had an online petition that went viral. It's more than 50,000 signatures. More than that, we worked very closely with the Bangalore Apartment Federation, and we actually got a set of bylaws for the member organizations to ensure that they were following the rules, which were both the Supreme Court guidelines as well as the Animal Welfare Board guidelines. And it has been very successful, but many people who have been harassed by their owners or by their tenants now can go back to something and say, I'm sorry, you can't do this. What we need to know is the very obvious thing that happens is when you see a dog which is looking a little, hungry or whatever in your areas, to say, oh, poor thing, let's send her to a shelter. A shelter is meant for dogs that are very ill, injured, or diseased. And you're sending a dog really into, if they're already half unwell or whatever, sending them in, exposing them to a lot of disease. So it's always better wherever you can to be able to cure a dog where they are, if it's a minor issue like a skin issue or just some eating or some whatever minor problems that there are. Shelters are very poorly funded, and as of now we have very few government shelters, in fact there are none, and that's something we need to work towards as well. The single organization that will have to focus on protecting animals is the BNP. By just being aggressive and active on animal birth control and anti-rabies vaccination, we use the word ABC and ARV very often, you will have half the problems in this city honestly resolved. Honestly. I will come to what animal husbandry department will have to do. It's much more recent. I'm not going to psych you, but I'm just saying the number of different laws that exist on anything, like if you were to interfere with a feeder who's looking after a dog, if you were to not allow a person to use a pet to use a lift in your apartment. There are very strong laws which have already been tried and tested, and it's the Constitution, the Supreme Court, the Animal Welfare Board of India through the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act have very strong umbrella under which cruelty can be avoided, the animal's life can be protected, provided implementation it works. Now, how can you make a difference? Very often, and I think I did an interesting chat with BPAC about 5 or 6 months back, and I was surprised to note how little all of us knew. Now, one of the people there actually said to me, they were such nice people, and they said, no, but there's too much of noise, so we want the dog to be fine, but we want the dog to be sent away to some forest. Now, he thought he was being kind, that he's not killing the dog, he's not complaining about the dog. So I said, how would you feel if you know that you're breaking the law? He was horrified. He said, no, I mean, all I'm saying is he's making a nuisance for himself here, and the neighbors are getting so irritated. So if we send the dog away, it would be better. Yeah, but you're breaking the law, and you could be dealt with very severely for doing so. So what is your option? We come back into that happy magic word, which is ABC. You up the ABC in your area, you're going to be much better. It's going to take time. It won't happen in the next 2-3 months, but in the next year, you will see your community becoming so much more comfortable and the dog's so much more in control. So one of the things that we need to do is we really do need to understand the laws on stray dogs and animals. We need to make sure that even by mistake, we don't inadvertently or because of lack of knowledge, break these laws, because then we're setting up a precedent. Half the problems that we have in BBNP, and I feel sorry for them sometimes, the calls that come into them are by people who are just not complaining about dogs or asking for dogs to be neutered. They are saying, can you take the dog away? And some of the easiest thing to say is the dog has got rabies, so you take the dog away. And they know that once it's got rabies, there's obviously a greater fear that we have to make sure the dog is picked up and evaluated. And it's expensive to do that. How is it that this can be stopped? Because the law is going to get tougher and tougher. And eventually, we've seen ourselves, many FIRs being launched against people who have done this and action being taken against them. So if we are doing this by error or by happenstance or sometimes by outright cruelty, please make sure you share with your friends, other people that, we don't know this, but this is the rules. So this is our only option. We are between a rock and a hard place. There's no culling, no relocation of dogs. Our only option, and yes, we don't want to have dog bites, etc. We want to protect both our dogs and our humans. We are here. We're between a rock and a hard place. The only option for us is to be able to really escalate and dial up, accelerate ABC and ARV. Nobody wants to take on the Constitution, Supreme Court, and the the laws of the country. I mean, nobody does. I think one of the best things you can do, and we are finding this increasingly, and I'm sure my colleagues in Citizens for Animal Birth Control and CG Memorial Trust will agree, being part of a social media group, being part of groups like ours, where you're able to exchange information, figure out who's, which particular ward is being taken care of this week, that there are several cases of puppies happening somewhere else, so we need to be able to accelerate the ABC program there. Social media and Facebook groups or WhatsApp groups are hard to make it happen, and it has happened very, very successfully. So in the last 2 years, you will find the advantages with people who are animal lovers and feeders to be able to coordinate with the BBNP. It makes it much easier because they're able to point out the dogs, and things are able to happen much more cohesively, much more efficiently and effectively, right? So communities are a critical part, and this is where again BNP becomes very critical, because we are looking at it from a ward level, and we're trying to figure out how we can leverage and make this an effective and compassionate animal-oriented ward. Yeah, so working with the government. Now we come to issues of animal cruelty. There is the newly set up State Animal Welfare Board. It's set up only last year in November, and there are many things that it has not yet got into place. It will, but whether it is a case of accident, abuse, breeder misusing an animal, or very poor conditions animals are kept, the State Animal Welfare Board will appoint district SPCAs, states, Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. This is a government body or construct across 30 districts of Bangalore, of Karnataka. So in Bangalore, we will have two. We'll have one district SPCA for Bangalore Rural and one for Bangalore Urban. And these are the two directors and members of the SAWB that you really need to know, because you can escalate things to them and they will have to action it as per the law. The reality is, and let me share this with you, that it's very new, so they don't know how to go about it. They're still struggling. We are hand-holding them as much as we can to tell them what needs to be done. Example, in the time of COVID, we had a number of pet shops that were shut down for 15 days. We had dogs, birds, rabbits, cats dying inside cages with no water, no food, no ventilation. So we actually, leaned on the SAWB. We leaned more on the BBMP, who knew a little bit more around navigating this, to get all these pet shops open. And we managed to escalate it to the State Animal Welfare Board, but also work with the BBMP on the ground. So even though it wasn't their job, BBMP stepped up to make sure that they were coming in to check on these heartrending conditions of the animals that were locked up for days and weeks, sometimes without food. So here's another area where you have to know how to engage in order to be effective. And I'm happy to talk to you about that a little later. As people, it's very, very important for us as citizens to do the responsible thing ourselves. And I can tell you 100 questions that you might have on, can we do this, can we do that, is this allowed, is this allowed? The strange thing is, I'll just give you a very wild example. I have a dog, and I'm saying, oh, how cute. I would love to see the dog having pups, and it's so sweet. And we all have that lovely thing of wanting to see the next generation, etc. So I love my dog, and I do all this. As for the new laws, this is interesting. So I just want to tell you this because you need to know how things are starting to work for the benefit of the animals, right? If you don't have genetic tests done on animals, you'll have dogs that inherit heart problems, hip dysplasia, so many issues. And eventually, though you and I may look after our dogs, most of these people abandon the dog if they find it to be sick. So if no genetic testing is done, now I have my Labrador, which is quite old or whatever, and then I, cross the dog, and then I have pups, and then I say I'm either going to give it away or I'm going to sell it. It doesn't really matter. The new laws classify me, even though I'm a person with a pet dog, they classify me as a breeder. So I have to apply for a breeder's certificate if I want to cross my dog or mate my dog. Do you see how this becomes impactful in the long run? Because people are going to be that much more, empathetic, conscious of their duty. There was a time when we just threw litter around the place because all we had was paper anyway. So even if it sort of degraded, it would go back to the soil. Today it's different. There's plastic. We are all so much more woke in saying we must do the right thing. And And part of that is knowing the laws and doing what's right from a sustainability point of view. So the laws are starting to really help in making sure the right thing is being done, provided you have, you implement it right. And therefore, all the other things that we ask people to do, it's critical for us to ensure that dogs are spayed. Spay is basically neuter. Spay is for a female more often than not. Spayed and neutered, vaccinated. 50% of the pets, the rabies deaths from this country are not from street dogs, they're from pet dogs. People have forgotten to renew their vaccination. And this is something I will talk about a little later. It's again a very long subject, so we'll move on from there. Asking people to adopt and not buy. If any of you were to see the terrible conditions under which dogs are bred in most of the breeder centers in this country, I can assure you, you will never buy a dog in your life. They are bred in tiny little cages in their own pee, poop. They're never allowed to be medicated, to be fed properly. They just are used as machines to breed. I can assure you, the pups look cute, but you will see how things change as they go along or they get older. They're just a money-making machine. So adopting, and most of Bangalore today is so fabulous as far as adopting dogs, rescuing, making sure they're adopting indies, or even if there's so many pedigreed rescue dogs that are being abandoned. Making sure dogs are tagged, so if dogs are lost, at least they can be reunited. We talked about band mills and home breeding. But there's also the other side to it. There's also the side of saying, hey, we have rights as citizens. We have to ensure people follow the law. So BBMP they have a charter as far as ABC is concerned. Let them follow the law to the letter. Let people who have dogs make sure the dogs are vaccinated and leashed when they go out. We have to also ensure that our cooperators, our BBMP engineers, our health officers, our ward committee, our assistant directors in our area know that we are on this as far as anything to do with animal birth control or rabies vaccinations are concerned. We want them to be involved. We want them to know the metrics of what is going on. We should know, why is this area not been, dogs not been picked up? Why is this not happening? And not only can we ask, we have to be involved in making sure that these are suitably actioned. There are a lot of rules around slaughterhouse and slaughtering, which you probably may not know. You can this can be done only at a registered abattoir or a slaughterhouse. You cannot arbitrarily go and slaughter on the way, anywhere, whenever you feel like. It's against the law, and you can escalate that to the your assistant director for BBMP in the neighborhood, and they will action it. Similarly, transportation of animals cannot be done you immediately escalate that to your police station. It's fine. What I would strongly suggest is, obviously, that you put things on social media, you tag people like CUPA or CARE or PFA. It gets the momentum. We had a situation where a woman was shot at by somebody with an air gun. I mean, this has got 1 lakh views in Bangalore. And we had people, rolling in from everywhere saying, how dare this happen? So there's a lot of outrage when things which are wrong happen. And we know now that even for animal-related issues, if we go and file an FIR at the police station, it is accepted. Police are far more amenable to understanding the issues around animal welfare than they ever were before. More needs to be, certainly understand that. Please take, adequate care if dogs are off leash or they're littering in public. Take cognizance of that. I'm going to leave this right now because there are conversations around ABC I need to have, because that's really, I think, cruelty and animal birth control is going to be 2 issues we need to talk about through perhaps a Q&A. But what we should look at is the vision of what the city should be. Again, this whole thing of saying, oh, we must do this, we must hit the metrics. Absolutely, we must make sure we neuter at least 60,000 dogs. We must have at least 50,000 babies vaccinations a year. We must have all zones, ABC centers up and running at a certain speed. We must have the standards and the hygiene standards to be absolutely up so that there's no deaths. We must do all of those things. But let's also visualize a city where there is goodness and there's compassion, And the dogs, because there are fewer of them and they're well looked after, that they live in harmony with people. That the cows in goshalas or whatever are fed and kept well. The other kinds of livestock that are, at least if they are going towards, unfortunately, there is a certain element of being part of the food system. At least it should be done as humanely as possible. So if we were to move towards that, you will see the stakeholders that are involved. We need the BBMP, we need the animal husbandry, we need the civil society, we need NGOs, we need the police. All these to be working in close conjunction together to make sure that happens. And another very important stakeholder that we haven't really thought about and we haven't talked about a lot, which is the rise of the petisan. The petisan is the new, the person who has just adopted or has been an owner of a pet or a parent of a pet for a long time and has never really thought about anything outside their own pet. It's like when you have a kid, you say, oh, how cute. But now you see a starving child on the road and you feel that sense of, because you're able to see that differently than you were before. So people tend to get a lot more aligned to, to community as petizans. And we are seeing the petizans of Bangalore really rising. So be proud of that. Many of you already may be those petizans. Many of you may have just, may not, but it's fine. It's just that it's so nice to see that it's already there. Let's define the city as something that can be used as a benchmark, for compassion, for systems, for implementation, for the right things being done. So all of us, if we do a little bit, I think we'll be doing all right. I'm gonna sort of hand this over to see what the questions are. And Soumya, I'd like you to take the lead for that. Yeah, I'm going to look at the questions as well. Just give me a second. Yeah.
Hello everyone, welcome to Grahapata. ಇವತ್ತು ಸ್ವೀಟ್ ಶಾಪ್ಸ್ ಸೋನ್ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿನ ಅದು ತುಂಬಾನೇ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ನೀವು ಸ್ವೀಟ್ ಶಾಪ್ ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ತಂದಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ಬೇಕು, ಆ ರೀತಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ.
One sec. I'm sorry, I just can't hear you at all.
I think,
yeah.
I think you can go to the chat, and I think there are two questions. Maybe you can deal with first.
Yeah. I'd like before I look at the questions, I just want to ask. I have Nandita online. Nandita, you're there. Can you just unmute?
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome. So I'd like to, I don't have, unfortunately, Harini. I can't see Harini on the line, but Nandita is a critical partner and at Citizens for Animal Birth Control. And she's done some amazing work in terms of trying to get the structure and, trying to get the whole machinery for ABC going along with BBMP and NGOs, etc. in Bangalore. I'd like to just ask you, Nandita, we've gone through very broad framework. This is a broad brush. What really needs to be done. Is there something that you would like to share?
Well, I think the only thing I could really add, I think you've covered it pretty much, end to end. But all I would say is that we need a lot more involvement from both BBMP and from the people. My complaint always has been that BBMP has not communicated this whole thing enough, especially, I'm rabid about birth control, and that's really what I focus on. As I put it, welfare of human beings by keeping the dog population under control and vaccinating them for everyone's safety. And this is something that BBMP has not publicized enough. You ask the common man in the street, oh, okay, there's a dog there, whom do you call? Nobody has a clue whom to call. People don't know there's a hotline. People don't know they can call and actually get them neutered. So I think what we need is a lot of awareness. That is the most important thing. If you have a fire, you call a certain number. If you want an ambulance, you call 108. But people don't know whom to call if there is any dog issue.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So there is, I think what we're talking about then would be a situation of empowerment. It's all very well to have these, what is the word for it? Sorry about that. it's really well to have a good point of view on what should be done, but having the mechanics of how to do it and empowering us all to feel that we can do it is a big thing. For example, Nandita, we have a helpline from the BBMP side on the what do you call it? Yeah, the who to call for each zone. Am I right? And for ABs.
Yeah.
But it's
BBMP
not,
Sahaya and the website. Yeah.
but it's not being shared as often.
Yes, that's right.
So I think
Priya,
this is really. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I have a question. You know, we are a layout of 300 families, not apartments, individual homes, and then there are a periodical clashes between the animal lovers and others. I don't say that there are animal haters. What happens is periodically there will be a case of stray dog attacking passerby, or children while playing, the stray dog gets agitated and they attack. These things keep happening once in a while, and then there is a hue and cry, and there is a demand for taking out all those dogs, send them away, and things like this. And at the same time, there are animal lovers who are very passionate about, they feed the stray dogs, and there are families who are also responsible in the sense, they take responsibility for even neutering them. But managing committee brokers peace between these two, extreme groups, and the problem is we regularly call the BBMP squad for neutering and vaccination. There was a period when there was no squad existing in BBMP, and when we tried to get QPI and others, they are also not very supportive. So population of unneutered stray dogs went up. But then now there is a squad in BBMP, but the problem is they are not very efficient. Like just before the lockdown, we had called almost every month, and only once in 3 times they managed to catch some dogs and take them and neutral them. And rest of them, they are not just able to catch them. But if the neutering is done efficiently, I think 90% of the problem is solved. And that is where BNP has to, play a very important role.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. So this is the reality of all of us on the ground. So you're one of the people who have, say, at least some sympathy or empathy for the dogs. There are people I know who really, really dislike them. And I am saying I'm not even going to judge, because sometimes I feel that from their point of view, they have every right to feel that degree of anger or rage. But I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to first say, as far as your people who want to get the dogs relocated, completely understand their point of view and completely understand their pain. But the law is the law. So maybe 5 years ago, BBMP actually agreed, saying, okay, we will do this. They can't anymore. It's just against every, they will get slammed by the chief secretary, by the animal welfare board. That's just not possible. So even if they want it to happen, it's like saying, I really don't like the fact that Priya has long hair, and I believe everyone with long hair, because they might carry COVID, has to be put behind bars. There's no law, so you can't do it. So you may have a point. Priya with long hair has a big possibility of carrying some virus and all. Yes, but the law is the law. So that's the first thing that one has to sit back and understand. That's why I mentioned we are between a rock and a hard place. There are some issues. There's some real issues, but this is the law. So our only hope is to be able to pick the ABC and ARV. That comes to your point, and Anjali also had a perspective. The BBMP is not doing enough. And then the reason they're not doing enough is they are not able to get enough ABC agencies across the 8 zones. Please remember, 3 years ago, we ran a campaign called Knights for Queens, which was to save the veterinary college. Nandita was a large part of it and made it happen at that time. That was to save the heritage, the animal birth control center that was there, as well as the trees. I can tell you that there was one ABC center for the whole of Bangalore. And what we kept pushing, finally, and made happen, was that we started getting them to at least populate the zones, that is the 8 zones of Bangalore, with some ABC centers. Now, some weren't up to the mark, some of them didn't have that good standard, so obviously there was a sloughing off. People don't want to sign up for the ABC program because it's not that remunerative, it's a lot of headache, a lot of people get involved, you relocated my dog is not here. So there's a lot of issues which happen. That's a reality and that's a grudge. Let's not get into too much of detail. but it has to be overcome. And the rigor that has to happen is for the BBMP to have three things: a very, very good agency, a very strong set of standard operating procedure, and a critical implementation framework in making sure the numbers happen. If you work backward from a vision of, say, 60,000 dogs, I have to work backwards. I have to make those numbers happen. And effectively and compassionately. Please do not get away from the fact that nobody wants to just go and neuter dogs for the sake of it. Nobody wants a dog to die on the table. So it is unfortunate now because of the number of pressures on because of lack of getting a good ABC center in each zone that this is happening. So people aren't responding, they're overwhelmed. If you look at East Zone alone, we have 44 wards in East Zone. It's a huge, huge zone. And East, covers a whole lot of very, places like even the Vidhan Sauda, etc. So it's crazy. Each zone has its own issues. And then there are also places where people don't want you to take away their dogs. People like Nandita and I have done private neutering at great cost. I'm saying, why should we do it? The government has got a budget for this. So there's no reason why they should not do it. But the only thing, and here's why a BNP structure can come in so useful, is that we can insist and insist again and again that we must hold them to account for getting the neutering done. And we must hold the citizenry responsible for saying, since you cannot break the law, the only thing which you can do is join hands with us and insist on ABC being followed. And worst comes to worst, get the dogs neutered privately through BBMP, whatever, but at least make sure that the dogs are safe. Even if there's a chance a dog is.
Yeah. I think the infrastructure is lacking in the sense, if there are 3.14 lakh, stray dogs in Bangalore, which means you need at least 100 squares, perhaps 1 square for every 2 wards to regularly, do the neutering and ensure that, they remain under control and the people are not, unnecessarily agitated. I think the more number of squares, it will go a long way, in solving this problem.
No questions. In fact, we've even gone to the extent of saying, why do we have to have 8 zones and 8 ABC centers? Why don't you open it up to some important centers to have more ABC agencies if they're willing to join? And the BBP has been open to that. Now, for the last 2 months, 1.5 months, we've had no ABC. And we've been converting that ABC into a feeding program. The dogs are well kept, they are friendly. Now they can be easily caught for ABC. So we are pushing. As of, I've written out a letter. Nandita has just sent a very strong mail to BBMP saying that this is what we need to have, and we need to have the countdown starting for ABC now, before the lockdown is finally lifted. So this is the, there are issues which are, we have to keep. I will have to say that we've tried so hard, we've fallen flat on our faces several times. So I will truly admit to that. I'm going to call in, and Anjali, I'm going to get to your point where you're saying that, at Rustumbagh, you said you're struggling with streeties. They sleep on the roads because there's hardly any traffic, and non-dog lovers are afraid of them.
Hey, Priya. Yeah, I'll just say something. Actually, the dogs are not the issue. The people are the issues. We have very, very friendly streeties here. They are very well taken care of. All are neutered. They get twice a day very good food. And all of us are taking very good care of these. We have about 8 streeties here. The only thing is now, since there are no cars going around and, people are walking. So they sleep on the road, and people walking by, they just go up and want to say hi to the people, but these people are scared and they want them to go away. So I have very, very categorically said these dogs cannot go away from here. It is illegal. Now, what is it that we can do? I don't know if there is a training required for these treaties. How do we get them to stay away from the main roads? We've shifted the feeding spots. We have designated feeding spots so they don't, stay in one place. Even then, there are, dogs. I am a dog owner, dog lover, everything. I don't know how to tackle this. It's going beyond, and it's becoming like there was a huge war about a month ago with this subject. So please help.
Actually, I can't help on that, because this is happening in many places. The thing is that you have a natural divide between the people who have had an issue, either who are scared of dogs or had a run-in with the dog. So they're in that space. You're in the space saying, "Arey, I'm looking at Chotu and Timmy and all your lovely fellows and all their names." The one thing which you can do is try and get the kids involved in some kind of a program. If I were in your place, I would say, "Hey, listen, as part of CSR, why don't you come once to the dog park in Government Park, or why don't you come to Care? Let's all just go there and say hello." Bring in an interesting person. I mean, if you know someone who's a bit of a well-known face who loves street dogs, and there are many celebrities who bring them in, have a chat, make a big deal about it. Publicize people who are doing good stuff with their dogs. The most important thing is for you to get the assistant director of that area to come in and talk to the owners, and to get the cooperator involved as well, because the cooperator will know the rules, and if he or she doesn't, then we have a real problem. But they should interact. And I'm going to just bring in, because Alvin has been silent, and I really need Alvin, are you there?
Yes, Priya.
Alvin, I can see. Great. So your thoughts, not just on what on what Anjali said, which is a very critical point, and also what with BNP given.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, go on.
Now, what is the main cause for the stray dogs? What is the cause behind this, that the stray dogs come? Is there any analysis made on that? That's number one. Number two is, what about the stray pigs and stray cattle?
Yeah. Why do the stray dogs come?
Yes. What is the cause behind it? One is the owners having abandoned the dogs or pups and all that. That's one cause. But the second one is the menace, what we see of the stray dogs. What is the main cause behind it? Has anybody made any study of it?
It's lack of animal birth control. If the animal birth control had been done effectively in the last 15 years, you would not be seeing 3 lakh dogs in Bangalore. You would be seeing not more than 1 lakh spread across 198 wards. And that's very doable. It basically means that you will have 2 or 3 dogs in each street, which is very doable. You feed them, they look after, then they finish their 10 years of living, and some of them pass on. You'll actually reach a stage of saying, "My God, we don't have any dogs in our neighborhood," etc. So it is poor animal birth control. Stray dogs and stray pigs are equally against the law, so they also have to be corralled and
in the corners, and the waste being picked up is one of the main and above in the Bangalore.
Yeah, and also as as Nandita was telling me, it's also because of it's all interconnected, poor garbage management. So once the garbage management issues are resolved, you will find the way all the street animals, whether it's cattle or whether it's pigs or whether it's dogs, are treated differently. It gets resolved much easier.
So what I want to suggest is, I mean, why don't BBMP take up this as also a garbage issue? Because of the garbage, it is leading to all these things. So there should be a better to manage the stray dogs and stray cattle and all that. Then they must provide adequate funding for carrying out the whatever birth control, ABC and other things what are needed, because the cleanest city in the world, or where there are no stray dogs, is Amsterdam. So Amsterdam has gone in for vaccination program. So I think
we lost you, Kumar.
Now what I said is, Amsterdam is a city in the world which has got least stray dogs.
Yeah.
And India is the one which is having the maximum stray dogs in the world, and also stray pigs.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, this is more related to the garbage issue as well. So it is just not, both the things are interrelated. So when it comes to stray dogs, yes, we can understand the love for animals and all that. But when it comes to the stray pigs, stray cattle, it's making the city more dirty.
I agree with you. So you're right. I think the garbage issue is an important connected one. It's not the only issue. I still think ABC has to be run in parallel, but better garbage management, a lot depends on our discipline. In fact, Nandita and I were talking the other day. She's moved areas, and she was saying that the same people who, were cribbing about the dogs in her area, who were perfectly mild managing their own business, were the same people who were spitting on the road and not segregating their garbage. So there's a lot that depends on us as people, and I completely agree with you that we have to be more careful. BBMP has also put in a lot of systems as far as the way the garbage is managed, and I think they're getting there. They're doing it independent of the dogs, not just because of the dogs. They're doing it for other reasons as well. And luckily for us, the person in charge for well, you might want to just check your okay, good. So is Randeep. Randeep is the BBMP Special Commissioner for Animal Birth Control and for Solid Waste Management. So we actually are on a lucky sweep there. Things are going pretty well. And we need to segregate properly. Most dogs will go after unsegregated garbage. So I get back to because I know that we're past time. Alvin, do you want to just jump
Priya?
in on the legal part of it? Just one sec, Rupal, just hang on.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah. So sorry, Alvin, do you want to just give a little bit of a base as to what we all need to be careful of as citizens and engaging with BBMP and SAWB?
Thank you, Priya. Thank you for the exaggerated introduction about me. It never fails to impress me about my own self whenever you introduce me. But just to share with you on where we stand legally, because I see a lot of people having issues with trying to reconcile animal welfare and nuisance, and these words, keep coming up once in a while. So I want to set the record straight with respect to how the law understands these two issues. First and foremost, when you look at the Indian Constitution, especially Schedule 7, it divides the functions of the state, the center, and those subjects which are concurrent. So animal welfare falls within the concurrent list, which means both the center and the state can manage and legislate on issues relating to animal welfare. Issues regarding nuisance, as everybody seems to call it these days, falls within the jurisdiction of the state, which is the state of Karnataka. Now, the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, which came about in 1960, was passed by the central government under the concurrent list. And it is under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act that we had the ABC rules come out in 2001, again by the central government. And again, we had a module passed by the Supreme Court under its jurisdictional powers under Article 142, which means that it is still law, which governs how each state must, ensure that ABC is conducted, and also each state must ensure that there is a monitoring committee set up independently consisting of private citizens to ensure ABC is in place, and that the monitoring committee keeps submitting reports to the Animal Welfare Board of India. We have the SAWB in place, we have the SPCAs. All of these are central government directives, right? No two doubts about that. The issue regarding nuisance, again, in quotes, which comes out is the responsibility of the municipal corporation. The municipal corporation has been set up under the Karnataka Municipal Corporation Act of 1976, which is a state government legislation. So when we look at the repugnancy of these two issues, there is no repugnancy at all, because under any circumstance, the mandate under the central government trumps everything that the state government does in terms of its regulations or laws to ensure negligence is minimized.
Yes.
Now, while that is there, so while the responsibility of the BBMP under the KMC rules is subservient to the responsibility of the BBMP under the central government directions, one must understand that the responsibility of the BBMP is very, very critical insofar as the ABC is concerned. So long story short, as you said, we're all coming back to ensuring effective implementation of ABC. So issues, but however, besides just non-implementation of ABC, I find that there is also a growing instance of irresponsible pet ownership and irresponsible feeding as well, right? A lot of people think that they're doing the God's job by going out in the streets and having these, I may sound extremely, this is a very, very unpopular opinion, but I think it's important to have it. Having people go about on a daily basis with cartons of food, distributing it 70, 60 bowls every single day, sort of in many ways gets these dogs to get agitated. They lose dependency, they lose their natural instincts to find food, look for food. They stop moving locations, because they know for a fact that at this point, at this place, and at this time, there is this person who's going to come and feed me. And it starts getting dogs to become a little more aggressive, and that is spread not just on the person who comes to feed, but on everybody else who walks the street. So while it is true that the responsibility of the BBMP is paramount here, we also need to understand that as pet owners, I'm not a pet owner myself, but as pet owners and as pet animal lovers, if you want to call it, or as animal activists, there's certain responsibility upon us as well to ensure that our feeding, or our just in terms of taking our dogs out for a walk, cleaning up after them, we play a very, very active role in minimizing this conflict.
It's true. I agree with you. We also take a lot of responsibility in making sure that our, dogs are welcome in the community. A lot of what we did in terms of responsible pet ownership is also making sure that our dogs are welcome. If you're going to be nonsensical and pooping everywhere and not doing this, people are going to hate them. They're going to hate our pet dogs. They're going to hate street dogs, etc. The point that you made on street dog feeding is a controversial one, because I know that there are points of view that when they are fed, they're much more complacent. They don't react so strongly, etc. But it's an interesting point to know, and I want you to just I want you to address Anjali's perspective that somebody just calls up, the BBMP and says, I need to, I have to get these dogs out. I just get them out because they may attack us in the future. Please give us a correct legal perspective as to what is the law on that. What can BBMP do? What can be done?
See, I think we've had this discussion previously also, Priya, that the responsibility of the BBMP is governed by the ABC rules and also by the Karnataka Municipal Corporation Act, right? So we have on one hand that the BBMP needs to follow the ABC rules to the T. To the T include, first of all, a lot of people think that the responsibility of ABC is upon NGOs. Absolutely not. It's upon BBMP, and the NGOs are doing the BBMP a favor by doing it for them. They're basically, this is delegated legislation or delegated executive powers, as so you call it. So when the BBMP is delegating the responsibility to NGOs to do the job, they need to let them do the job right. So when you call upon somebody and say that, there is a dog on the street and we want them out, that is in contradiction to the ABC rules itself. The ABC rules direct the BBMP, mind you, to ensure that every dog that is picked up, neutered and spayed is brought back and left to the exact same location where the dog is picked up from. And if the BBMP were to actually just pick up a dog from the street and go and drop it in the outskirts like we have seen previously, we have seen these things happening before. Maybe not from the BBMP directly, but we've seen a lot of associations hire private dog catchers, cluster a lot of dogs from their community and go and drop them on the outskirts, right? Actions like this come about and associations go crazy because dog population is not being controlled because of ineffective ABC.
Correct.
Right? So you cannot expect the BBMP to come and take a dog and go. That is not going to happen. At best, you can expect them to neuter the dog and release the dog back. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but a neutered and spayed dog tend to be far less aggressive and instinct driven than those who are not neutered because of the hormone issues. I think probably you know better regarding these issues. So legally speaking, again, it is absolutely not possible for the BBMP to relocate. And if the BBMP isn't doing it, it is not okay for the people to then just pick up the dogs and go relocate them.
And what happens if they do?
Now, that is where we find that the law has been a little more, in terms of ABC, the responsibility is on the municipality. That says nothing on what happens if an association just decides to pick up a set of dogs and go. So what we do under these circumstances is book them under the PCA. We book them under the PCA for causing a dog because when you pick up a dog from a locality and go and dump it it's the equivalent of killing a dog, right? Yeah. It's equivalent of maiming a dog. So you're not just booked under the PCA, but you're also booked under the IPC under section 498 under 429. Which provides for putting a dog on, because let's just be very clear, whether it is a pet dog or whether it is a street dog, the PCA doesn't make any differentiation. Yeah, you can be booked under both these provisions, and you will have to face criminal consequences. Not the association, but the individual members of the association will be held criminally liable, and that is what we did with respect to the association that decided to suo moto throw these dogs away from the outskirts.
Yes, I remember that case.
Yes.
So we need to know that, Alvin, and thank you for sharing, because we also need to know the penalty involved if the law is broken. Because if, like Anjali has got a point saying, listen, we've neutered and spayed all our dogs in our street, but just in case they bite, the association says, can you just throw them out? If they do, they will face criminal consequences. So I think this is important to be able to address that and to move on. I'm very conscious that we are 20 minutes beyond we started at 5:10 or 5:13, but we are a little bit beyond time. I'll be guided by Subbu, or whether we can take one more question.
I think we can. Ram has one question now.
Okay, so we'll take a question from Ram. My daughter's association, hi Ram. My daughter's association wants her cats to be leashed. Are they right? I don't always to answer that, but I know cats are notoriously difficult to leash. But I have seen this happen overseas, and people do that. My answer would be, if it's okay with the cat, why not? Inside the house, anyway, they're all over the place. They'll be jumping on your walls. But is the law? The law is quite strict on dogs being leashed in public places. That is where other people are going. You have to be very careful. But I don't know about this. So, Alvin, do you have a point of view on that?
I do have a point of view. It's actually ridiculous that somebody is expecting cats to be leashed. In that, if you actually were to leash a cat, it is suffocating the cat. In fact, it is against the natural order of the cat to be leashed. So I would hold the person who sort of expects the cat to be leashed. And in fact, in this case, if you were to go ahead and leash, even you would be held criminally liable. Right. So I think I don't know how
that's cruelty to the cat. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know how many of you are on here, and I probably don't probably know all of you personally. But in case there is an issue of very blatant cruelty that you see happening, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will ensure that people responsible for cruelty, while you can, if you are sort of apathetic towards animals, I completely understand. If you want to maintain your distance from animals, I completely understand. If there is a case of irresponsible pet parenting, holding them accountable for their actions, I completely understand. But being outright cruel to an animal is something that I will never advocate. And I feel that those who really need support can please feel free to reach out to me. I think, Priya, if you could just share my email ID with them, I will ensure that under all circumstances, they are put to task.
Yeah. So I have to share, the only time I ever tried to leash a cat was when we had 3 kittens, and we had this cat climbing the walls, and we had 2 tomcats trying to attack them. I never forgot that day. It was horrendous, because I was trying to help, because thinking that, just like how you leash dogs, you can leash a cat. Oh my God, that cat climbed the curtain. It was crazy, but I did manage to save all 3 kittens and the mother at that time. So that was one. Thank you for that, Alvin. And just for your information, I've been trying very hard to get Alvin to agree to be pro bono lawyer for Future Memorial Trust in exchange for my dog JD. We're working out the terms. We'll figure it out. But thanks, and Alvin's opinion is really something I value.
Priyaji, good evening. This is Yashaswini. I'm extremely sorry to interrupt your discussion. This is very, interesting discussion, and every Sunday, BNP is doing really great in, hosting this kind of interesting topics. and every topic has been very interesting. And this is something which I'd also share my viewpoints, since I'm a dog lover. And apart from that, we as a human, what I would consider in sense, yes, we do have this ABC and the birth control kind of plans and everything happening, but reality is not happening. And one question which I quickly come up with my mind is that, is there any kind of restriction, like in a square kilometer so many dogs should be there as stray dog? Such kind of any micromanagement is there? That's one point. And second point is that, see, we always think, since these animals are just with 5 senses and they don't have a sense of expressing or voicing out their grief, we only put them in a very lower strata. But we fail to understand that these animals are also part of ecosystem, and to have a biodiversity and equilibrium in our system, the fauna and flora are very important for humans. That somewhere we are very devious. I'm very sorry that I'm even taking everybody under consideration, but we as humans are very devious when it comes to our existence, but we forget our coexistence. So somewhere even BBMP, apart from looking at this vaccinations and the birth control and everything, they should also emphasize this one point, saying that per square kilometer, how many stray dogs or how many of these animals are permitted. And see, if such micromanagement is happening, I would say, like, even they're also existing happily and they don't even bother us. So BBMP is having a huge responsibility on them, not only concentrating on humans, as Mrs. Subbu was saying about the waste management. That is really causing a heck in our environment. We throw the trashes or these garbages, and these poor animals, they go and feast on it actually. So it's not their mistake, it is our mistake. So somewhere, yes, Priya, I just want to know, like, is there any limitation, like per square kilometer or something that we can micromanage, like so many stray dogs should be there, or how is that we can help them?
No, there is no limitation. I think if you look at places like Jaipur, which I look at as an amazing standard, they've had no rabies case in the last year. They've had a very manageable set of dog population. They have people who are more or less, sort of in control. Communities are supporting their dogs. They've got great shelters. That's what we need to aspire. I would say that if I had to have about 4 or 5, if I had to have 4 or 5 dogs in my neighborhood, I'm doing okay. There was a time in my area where I did not have more than 2 or 3, 4, dogs that were well looked after. Now suddenly the population has increased, and you have a huge number. One second. Sorry. We have a huge number of it's a spike really in terms of female dogs that we're not able to catch, and a lot of pups that we're seeing. So there is an issue which is avoidable. But the thing is, there are very few people like you, Yashaswini, who would say things like, we were looking at it from this point of view of the dogs, and I think it's laudable. But the important thing is for us to keep a balance. There will be one Priya and one Yashaswini, and there will be other people who find this a nuisance. And I think we have to be able to, as a movement, to be able to speak with the voices of all, which is what is very important when we understand that what we do right now for animal welfare is benefiting animals as much as we're benefiting human beings. So when I have my naysayers who come in and tell me, oh my gosh, you and you animal lover people, I mean, because of you, the reason why we're so frantic about ABC in the city is because we want to protect the children. We want to protect you and me as much as we want to protect the dogs. So once people understand, and you must always, when you socialize this issue, please position it as something which is pro-human welfare and animal welfare. If you put it as animal welfare, more often than not, you will get no buy-in at all. I would say that people who love animals are about maybe 10 or 12% of the population. So your job is to be able to make this anchor to the balance, the ones at least who listen, maybe 30-40%, and help them understand that investing in ABC and investing in partnering on this animal issue benefits human beings, also benefits animals. It's much easier to get a tie in there. If I want to keep my community safe, my children safe, my neighborhood safe, I have to escalate ABC and ARV. Am I an animal lover? Yes, no, maybe. But I'm a good community person by doing it right. So position it. My question is always, don't get into, I've had enough people sort of wanting to throw stones at me and yell and shout. At the end of it, the moment I position it like this, they look at me as somebody who who speaks their language, who understands. So I would strongly suggest that anytime you run into an issue, please just sort of look at this as something which is good for both human beings and animals. And I'm just grateful that we have a chance to do it.
Yes. Thank you so much, Priya.
We should close it now. Thank you, Priya. In fact, if you compare it to the wild animals, the dogs are one of the friendliest creatures on the earth. So if you only take care that they don't become aggressive, coexistence should be the easiest thing to do. But that needs different people to discharge their responsibilities properly. I think if that is done, we can coexist very peacefully with the stray dogs. But that is something which BNP also will aim at, in different level. But the awareness, what are our responsibilities is very important. I think in that respect, this talk today has been extremely useful. Many of us, we didn't know about the law for the first time, try understand. There are different laws and we should be aware of them and make use of them so that we don't err on the wrong side. And at the same time, have a very peaceful life with the dogs. So I have to close it now. And thank you so much. I also want to thank Alvin, but he has already left. Thank you, Priya, so much. And maybe after some time.
Yeah. Thank you, Priya.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. Stay safe.
Wonderful session. Thank you so much. Real working session. Thank you so much.
This conference.